Welcome to Methods Unsound presents Moving On, a 5-part mini-series on the films we used to love that now make us cringe. My name is Christopher Ratcliffe, one of the founders and writers of Methods Unsound, a semi-dormant pop culture website that we've decided to resurrect for this period of extended quarantine. Joining me from the comfort of their own homes via their own laptops, because this is how all podcasts are recorded right now, are 4 other members of the Methods Unsound team. Let me introduce them all to you. First, we have Joachim Farncombe. Hi, Joe.
Good evening.
How you doing?
I'm all right. Yeah, not bad.
Good.
All right.
Is there anything you can recommend that you've watched over the last 7 days?
So the only thing that I watched that was new to me, I started watching the ITV drama Quiz, which tells the story of the very famous quiz show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, starring Michael Sheen as Chris Tarrant. It was surprisingly gripping. Wasn't great, but it was also like a real trip down memory lane about when there was 4 or 5 channels on TV, and it was all odd. My God, that show was really compelling. I've forgotten how gripping it was.
Yeah. So do you in terms of drama, do you think that the dramatization starring Michael Sheen is as gripping as the actual broadcast episode of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Oh, hell no. Hell no. Just go back and watch some old
any episode of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, right? That's
right, exactly.
Solid gold.
How's Sheeny's Chris Tarrant impression?
I think it's one of his best impressions.
Better than Frost impression.
That's pretty good as well. But I think it's better than his Blair impression.
Right.
Gosh.
He's good at impressions.
He's good. He's a great impressionist. He's one of the top impressionists, isn't he? He's like
Rory Bremner.
He's like Bobby Davro.
A sensible Phil Cool.
Wow. Oh dear, he is Phil Sensible. Thanks, Joe. Next, we have Ted Wilkes. Hi, Ted. How are you?
Hi. Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well too, thank you. We're very cordial. I like this.
So
No, I don't want to know.
You don't want to know.
What have you been watching?
So I have been watching the latest series of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which is on Netflix right now, which I've been very much enjoying because I haven't had the opportunity to catch that yet. But it's just one of those shows where you can stick it on and all of a sudden 10 have gone. So I feel that I need to ration myself, otherwise I'm going to be finished before I know it. But no, it's great. It's really, really good fun. I really enjoy Andy Samberg and Terry Crews as well. And the guy who plays Roman Holt, I've forgotten his name, but he's fantastic. But yeah, it's well worth watching.
Okay.
Even if it's just background TV, it's great.
It's a good show you can dip into as well. You don't need to watch it in order or anything. You can watch the latest episode and you'll still get everything in it and be fine with it. So
that's for the listeners. That's Matt Owen, who hasn't been introduced yet.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. All these sound like you're very much damning it with faint praise, I feel. But that's in the times we're in right now. Maybe that's a positive. Catherine Thompson.
Hi.
Hello. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
What have you been? Well, I'm all right. Yeah, no, I'm still fine. Thank you. What have you been watching this week?
I dipped in, and when I say dipped in, I smashed through the War of the Worlds. So not the very traditionally played BBC one that came out a few months ago, but I think it's on Fox Sci-Fi, something like that. Sort of French-American production. Doesn't really bear that much in common to the book The War of the Worlds, other than the aliens. And that's it, really. But it's pretty good. Nice, apocalyptic, if you're in a pandemic and you want something nice and apocalyptic to watch. Good array of characters. The acting is good across the board. Nice and enjoyable, good and tense. Trying to think. Leah Drucker's in it, Gabrielle Byrne, Daisy Edgar Jones, if anyone's been watching Normal People. That girl. Recommend.
What would you say is there? Is there a spin on it? What differentiates it between every other sort of adaptation of War of the Worlds?
I couldn't say that it's got anything too specifically original about it, but it just has a nice set of characters that have got their certain things going on. A nice mixture of places, half across France and half across the UK. Sort of, if you like the first season of something like The Walking Dead, where they're just sort of trying to get on with the apocalypse, then you probably like this.
Cool. All right. Well, that's good to know. Finally, but not leastly, if that's a phrase, Matt Owen, how are you?
Hello. Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Are you still fine?
No, I've dipped a bit.
Yeah, you sound like it.
I know. I really came down during that whole apocalypse chat, and I feel like it's going to take a lot to sort of put me back up again. So, Matt,
if you're going to take a lot of speed before we record this, you should probably do it, closer to recording, so it doesn't wear off halfway through.
Yeah, I know, but I've also been mixing it in strawberry milkshake, and it's not
strawberry.
Yeah, I know, it's disgusting. Anyway, Matt, perk me back up with a tasty recommendation.
What have I watched this week? We've done a few things. We binged Devs on the FX show. Did somebody else recommend that the other week?
Ted did.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was all right. That was quite good. I thought it could have had a more not downbeat, but a more shocking ending. I won't spoil it because I'll spoil it if I give my suggested endings away. But
you could tell us all the endings that you would have done rather than the one that.
Yeah, I'd have had one of the main characters go back to the beginning of the universe and be cursed to be God. I think that would have been more existentially.
Alex Garland is probably like, why didn't I do that?
But and also I watched. Bear with me on this. I watched Dark Angel, which is a Dolph Lundgren movie from 1990, and it was great. It was really good. It's kind of straight to video. An alien comes to Houston. I think it's set in weirdly in 1990, and he goes around shooting people up with heroin so that he can extract their brain chemicals when they're high as a kite, and then sell them as space drugs. And Dolph Lundgren has to stop him, and it was brilliant.
I've seen it.
I loved it.
That. Yeah. Where in the pantheon of great Dolph Lundgren films from The Punisher to Universal Soldier does it fit?
It's not quite Universal Soldier. It's probably Showdown in Little Tokyo. Equative.
Well, underrated gem.
There you go. So it took me back to drinking cider when I should have been at school when I was 16.
Brandon Lee's second best film is Showdown in Little Tokyo.
Yeah.
All right, guys, those were great recommendations. Thank you very much. That will pack my week full. Let's move on to the meat of the podcast. So, in this mini podcast series, which we've subtitled Moving On, the team will take it in turns to pick a film they used to love for a brief period of time, but they've now grown out of. The other guests will then pick an element of the film they find interesting, shameful, or weird, and basically make the person who picked the film hate themselves for bringing it to everyone's attention again. Then at the end, we'll try to pick one thing each that we like about the film, if possible, and we'll rate the film out of 10 and definitively conclude whether there's anything redeemable about it, or whether it should be forced to walk the plank, swim to a desert island, and eventually either starve to death or use the single round of ammunition loaded into a pistol on itself. All this does is prove that I watched the film. This week, it's Ted Wilkes' turn to pick the film. Ted, would you like to introduce your film and explain why you liked it at the time and why you two have now sadly grown apart?
Well, I would, yes, please. So I picked Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl, which is the first Pirates of the Caribbean film. And it was interesting, kind of, because I knew that I really loved it when it first came out. And I can remember watching it back on ITV4 because they did it like as an omnibus, like the whole Pirates of the Caribbean series, one after the other every day. And I found myself watching them all. And it was really interesting because they kind of just bled into this one long film. And I thought I remembered really disliking the first one and then really liking the final one, but it was actually the other way around. But anyway, and I started to think about why I liked it so much in the first place. And it brought me to that when I was a kid, we used to go to my grandparents' house in Cornwall for like our summer holidays, and I used to watch Captain Blood with Errol Flynn on repeat. And that used to be kind of my go-to film, along with My Fair Lady and Hello Dolly. And I thought that this kind of swashbuckling adventure was just the best thing ever. So I think that Pirates of the Caribbean kind of awoke something about that in me again. And I mean, big budget fantasy action stuff is my jam. And I really thought that in this you can kind of see the roadmap to stuff, like the Marvel franchise universes and such. And I always compare it to The Mummy, the Brendan Fraser film, for this kind of fantasy action element, and I thought that was super cool as well. But revisiting it, I thought maybe I do still like this, but I obviously see a lot of holes with it, and I don't know if we go into that one now or
No, please.
Yeah. So I think it's weird. It's kind of like Orlando Bloom and Keira Knightley are in a different film, and everyone else seems to be behind the idea that this is a bit of a joke, except those two, who they've kind of given another script to. And when they're separate, they seem to be trying to overact each other. And then when they're together, they want to chew the scenery before the other one can get to it. And yeah, I felt that was a bit of a. There's this really when after they've abandoned Jack to his fate, and then they have this little scene where he wraps her hand up, and I was just like, oh my god, this is painful to watch. Why am I doing this to myself? And then also as well, it had the reverse problem of Police Academy, in that the act one is so long. It's like 50 minutes long before they even begin like their adventure. And then the rest of the film is over comparatively quite quickly. So I feel that it feels a bit weighted down on one side too far.
Okay, cool. Right. Well, let's open up the floor for interrogation. Who would like to begin with their thoughts and feelings about Pirates of the Caribbean?
I think this film is actually about 15 films, and they had 15 scripts, and they've tried to glue them together. Because why is this film 2.5 hours long?
Great question.
Why is it not 80, 90 minutes of? Because I like one of the good things that I thought about it was I was like rewatching it was like there's quite a lot going on in like every scene has a lot of character building and action that says something, and in addition to dialogue, which is a good thing, I think it's clearly been well put, but it just goes on and on and on, and by about halfway through I was like, why didn't he just take the medallion off her while she was doing it, or why didn't this happen? Why didn't she just give him the medallion? Just go, yeah, sure, yeah, you go, have it. It's fine.
The stakes end up being quite low, don't they? I think that's the problem. It's like, if it's just a drop of blood, what was the big deal? Why are you so terrified?
Yeah, Ted, why does this film go on forever? Why did you make me spend 11 days watching it?
Yeah, man. 2 times as well, because we postponed the fucking record.
Yeah, sorry about all of the above with that one.
Gore Babinski.
Yeah, I mean, because I think that's one of the things. He is the main reason it's 2 films, because I think that Disney presented this family fun adventure that was going to hit like a 4-quadrant audience, and then you give it to the guy who made The Ring, and he's like, well, no, I want to make this horror film. And because you can kind of see some of the horror tropes that come through, the bit where Keira Knightley is in the wall and you can just see through the crack in the wall where she's hiding. And there's other elements of the horrific in it as well. But then every so often there'll just be this kind of jokey kid adventure-y moment, a bit like the Goonies or something, and they don't seem to marry together.
There's a lot in what you were saying just now about, well, basically, like, who's the star of this film?
Well, yeah, and
who's the main character of this film?
Well, I mean, so like we kind of follow Orlando Bloom, like Will Turner, because he's the guy who has the journey to go on to kind of realize who his father is. And archetypically, what's his face? It's completely gone now. Jack Sparrow is kind of his mentor who propels him off onto this adventure. But then he gets all the best lines. He gets all the action. He gets all the stuff to do. And it feels a bit like everyone else takes a back seat to Johnny Depp doing his strange thing throughout it.
What's your name?
Smith. Oh, Smithy, if you like.
What's your purpose in Port Royal, Mr. Smith? Yeah, and no lies.
All right then. I confess. It is my intention to commandeer one of these ships, pick up a crew and Tortuga, raid, pillage, plunder, and otherwise pilfer my Weasley black guts out.
I said no lies.
I think he's telling the truth.
If he were telling the truth, he wouldn't have told us.
Unless, of course, he knew you wouldn't believe the truth, even if he told it to you.
One thing I thought is like when I was sort of having to think, it's really hard to separate Pirates of the Caribbean from the time period it was, because now there's been 50 sequels or whatever, and you've seen Johnny Depp sort of morph into this constant Tim Burton movie character where he's doing this kind of stuff all the time. But before Pirates of the Caribbean, he hadn't been in that many things that the general public would be really familiar with. Edward Scissorhands and stuff like that. What's Eating Gilbert Grape, Edward? None of them were massive blockbusters, if you know what I mean. And then you've got Orlando Bloom that must have been straight off of Lord of the Rings, and Keira Knightley just bubbling up into fame. And it's this real specific period where they're sort of trying to spread across these three actors they've got that are sort of coming across. But actually what Johnny Depp at the time was really lauded, his performance. But now you look back at it and you just think, oh God, it's just Johnny Depping as hard as possible. But at the time it sort of was quite unique and quite original. So it's just, I feel like they had so many places they were trying to go. They're like, oh, we've got Orlando Bloom, famous from Lord of the Rings. Get him in there, and he's playing this straight guy. And then you've got Johnny Depp just doing something completely different, and then it's sort of really confusing stuff going on.
Catherine, could you manage to sort of separate all of that sort of post-history Johnny Depp stuff? The fact that you've seen Jack Sparrow be retrod so often. Did you actually watch him in this and go, oh yeah, he's good, or not?
I think I could remember well enough watching it the first time as a teenager and being like, this is quite fun. Again, it's a billion years long, so that's no good. And it's sort of enjoying his performance in that sense. But now you just look back at it and it feels really tired. So kind of a bit of both. I think if it had been an hour and 20 minutes, as we discussed, I probably would have enjoyed it. I felt the scenery's really fun, the location's really fun, it's sort of got pirate funness. I quite enjoyed the little fight scene on where they make the swords and stuff like that. It's there's fun stuff in there, but it's just so tediously, it just goes on forever.
You need to find yourself a girl, mate. Or perhaps the reason you practice 3 hours a day is that you already found one and are otherwise incapable of wooing said strumpet. You're not a eunuch, are you?
And the other question I had to ask Teddy, of all the things that you're going to make a film about or base a film on, where does a theme park ride land in your scale of best reasons to make a film?
Yeah, I always, because it is a bit like the film itself is a bit like a ride. You're just being thrown around all these different turns and twists, and you're just hoping that the audience will go along with you because they're strapped to their seat, basically. I think that's probably why they saw it. They thought, hey, this is a good idea. But the whole thing about pirate films interests me because you've turned this historically marauding group of guys who pillaged and plundered and raped and did whatever they wanted, and now they're kind of this figure of fun. No one's done that with the Vikings or the Romans or the cowboys. There's kind of this collective subconscious now where we're like, yeah, pirates, they were just jaunty little drunkards who went round and took things off rich people, which I think is quite interesting.
Do you not think that was a bit of it was one of the things I found a problem with the film, because it tries to sort of sell Johnny Depp as somewhere between a pirate and not a pirate. So he's he is a pirate, but he's not as bad as the horrible pirates that leave their mates on on islands to die and stuff. But then you keep sort of coming back to the idea, subtly reminded that actually what Johnny Depp does is go around raping and robbing people.
Yeah.
It makes it hard to kind of root for him, and you're not really sure if you are supposed to. And then he's very, very lechy on Keira Knightley, which I think might just be like of its time, but it was like kind of unpleasant. Yeah.
He is Johnny Depp's character does stand in stark contrast to the other, like the marauding Blackpool pirates. I was quite shocked that in the first 15 minutes someone gets shot in the face, like at point blank range. And I was like, oh shit, this isn't as fun and knockabout as I remember, because shit gets real and pretty dark like quite quickly.
That's a good point, though. It's like, I mean, I guess from a filmmaker's perspective, a pirate movie is always going to cost a lot of money to put together, right? So you've kind of you probably can't finance a movie like that if you were just, it's just full of scumbags raping and killing people all the way through, right? It's got to appeal to a wide family audience just to make its money back, right?
Matt, you'll remember this. What's the pirate film that's famously a huge bomb that has Gina
Cutthroat
Davis?
Island.
Cutthroat Island was a massive, massive, big, expensive failure, and pretty much no one made a pirate movie for 30 years until Pirates of the Caribbean.
Are we counting Waterworld as a pirate movie?
Also a failure.
The most expensive flop of all time.
But also the best flop of all time.
Oh, yeah.
But weirdly, did the reverse of Pirates of the Caribbean, where the Waterworld film didn't do very well, but has led to a theme park attraction that it's apparently very critically well regarded and has been going for years and years. And it's a stunt show spectacular.
Is that Jake and the Simpsons with the arcade game? With the
yes, that's exactly right.
40 quarters.
38, 39, 40 quarters. This better be good.
Game over. Please deposit 40 quarters.
What a rip!
I just want to bring it back to the theme park thing just for a brief second. I think it's interesting that the film itself has nothing to do with the actual narrative of the theme park ride. Apparently, the producers were really concerned about the fact that they'd done one the year before called Country Bears, which was like an absolute box office failure.
So
based on a.
Have you ever seen
right?
it?
Okay, no, but it looks horrifying. And apparently, after that was a failure, they decided that their Pirates of the Caribbean film should have as little to do with the actual theme park ride as possible.
What was the Eddie Murphy one that also came out?
Haunted Mansion.
Yeah.
Again, a bomb, yeah.
I wonder if that was had anything more to do with the ride than this one did.
No, it doesn't. The theme park podcast that I listen to regularly did an episode on it, and they stated
a dog with some keys in its mouth is about as far as you get, isn't it?
Okay, I have a question, Teddy.
Sure.
I found it very surprising how old-fashioned the film felt. And mainly that's just because even despite its ridiculous length and the fact it was so tedious in places, but I could actually follow the plot and it was all quite logical and linear. And I feel like it's old-fashioned because summer blockbusters are sort of now much more dense and confusing and like harder to follow. Yeah. How do you think that summer blockbusters have changed since Pirates of the Caribbean, and have they changed for the better or the worse, or am I just an old person who doesn't like films to be too busy?
Yeah, I think that's it's interesting as well, because obviously now the summer blockbuster is the next superhero movie, the next Marvel, the next entry in the Marvel canon, and I think that because Catherine said earlier, when they fight, it's kind of the swashbuckling, two guys with a sword, across the bow of a ship, and I found that quite quaint now that I've seen, the whole of the Avengers team take on Thanos. I'm not really. I'm like, when does the entertaining stuff happen? And I think the point is as well about the narrative. There are so many MacGuffins in this that they're ramming it home to you that, oh, we're after this thing now, we're after that thing, we're after this thing, we're after that thing. And it is quite linear. You can follow it quite easily.
Do you think
Whereas,
that might be part of the reason we found it really long and boring? Not being funny, but like you're used to like a 2 or 2.5 hour movie having like a lot going on. If you just compared it to like, I don't know, Infinity War or something, you're jumping back and forth in time, you're going back to different movies, all of this. Not saying that that's like the pinnacle, but this was just like, yes, a very linear storyline, but then it just like, just another thing. Just felt this was like another thing was happening. I know that's what's happening in all of life and movies.
I find it quite interesting as well that every so often there was this kind of beautiful establishing shot, and I was just like, okay, we can move off that now. We can move off that now. Oh, we're still looking at it.
Sorry, there's a lot of exposition in this as well, though, right? Like,
oh, good God, yes.
All the way through, people are. You must put on this corset now for reasons that will become apparent.
and the thing is that Ted Elliott and Terry Rossary, I mean, they can write. You know, they've written stuff like Aladdin, Mask of Zorro, Shrek, and then in this, there's
that one film.
It's like the ultimate mashup. Like,
wow.
Yeah. And you're like, there's whole stretches of conversations where people are like, oh, this is plot point A. And, oh, no, that's plot point A. Yeah, we need to get to plot point A. And you're like, why are we having this conversation? I know that. But I mean, I suppose it is that it's ultimately written for kids. And I think that I forgot that going into it because I thought, oh, Gore Verbinski, it's quite horrific. It's about pirates. It's got Johnny Depp in. There's going to be something for the adults as well. But ultimately, it is. It's just for the kids.
Do you think that people will still watch this? Bearing in mind, right, it's 20 years old. I don't think we've mentioned that. The film is like 20 years old now, which is quite sort of startling. But do you think people will still watch it in another 20 years' time? I ask that because Raiders of the Lost Ark is now 40 years old, and it's still beloved. And Pirates of the Caribbean has that same, it's trying to emulate that sort of old-fashioned family action-adventure, but with obviously a darker, gorier edge. But do you think people will still be watching Pirates of the Caribbean in another 20 years' time?
I mean, because doing the research back on this, I forgot that this got nominated for Oscars. And that's kind of a roadmap, I potentially think, to it's going to be in the cultural landscape, or it's going to remain in the cultural landscape. I mean, I suppose that it's the last swashbuckling movie that's come out. And until that's replaced, I think that it's still going to be seen. I mean, is it on Disney? I don't have Disney Plus. Is it on? It must be on Disney Plus. Yeah. So, I mean, if Disney is still pushing it at Disney Plus, I can imagine that people will still be watching it.
I think as long as there's theme park rides based on it, then there will it will be a franchise that can't die. I think seems to be the model at the moment. Does anyone else have anything to ask Ted?
Yeah, I got a question. So I had a thought that this film has seemed to be very successful. A lot of people seem to think because of Johnny Depp. My feeling was that it was a tolerable film despite Johnny Depp. I found his performance to be like this kind of weird, what's his name, Keith Richards impression the whole way through. Yeah, I just wondered if you had to reflect on that. The other thing I was going to say was that I find it quite sad, I think we've already touched on this, that Johnny Depp used to be this cult hero. I think a lot of the films that he used to be involved with, he used to love, and this film marked the change, him turning into some kind of mainstream fool and all the nasty things that happened in the later day. I found that quite a sad moment, and sort of grown to hate him as a result. And there is a question here somewhere, but the other thought I had was the film seemed to me like it could work without Johnny Depp. You've already mentioned Errol Finn's watching for like films in childhood, and that Orlando Bloom is essentially that Errol Flynn character. And actually, that was fine with Errol Flynn. You've got your Keira Knightley character, you've got your baddie pirates. Why do you need this kind of weird, eccentric, eye-lined fool?
I think people loved him though. That's my memory of it. That they were like really taken away with this like unusual performance of his as it was at the time. Like I think genuinely, I agree that like I watched it, and especially as I was saying, like years of watching him do this tomfoolery, it's got really tiring. At the time, people ate it up.
It felt like it was a massive risk. Like the studio didn't necessarily know what they were letting themselves in for. This cult hero that's kind of, okay, he's done some big films, he's becoming a big star, But in terms of how he delivered his performance, it sounded like that came out of the blue a little bit, and there was a bit of a kind of, they had to stake a lot on that, and obviously they won on the back of it. But
I'll just say, I mean, I guess the fact that his character sustains 5 films like throughout a franchise, even until just a couple of years ago. Maybe he was only meant to be more of an incidental character, but the fact that
I think that's like one of the biggest things is like the whole thing's been done to death because like part 6 is in planning at the moment, right? At least, but he is meant to be a side character, isn't he? I mean, he's a fun one. All of the other films are all about him. It's just like done to death, right?
When I watched it, I forgot again how involved he was in the plot, and I think that he is just such an active character in the whole thing. He kind of drives everything to the next scene when he's in it, and I think that obviously we're engaged with characters who are like that. But as well, I also, when I was watching him, I thought, every friendship group's got this guy who just turns up and is a bit silly, and we all kind of like him. And he's not a hero, but he just kind of he bumbles about and he's fun and it's nice. And I thought, I can see a lot of kind of original and different things in him that I think is just quite inherently interesting to watch.
All right, everyone named the Jack Sparrow in their friendship group. 1, 2, 3, go. Shame.
Yeah. I wanted to talk. Zoe Saldana's in it, which
What?
I forgot.
Is she?
Yeah.
She's one of the 2 named female characters in the film.
she's such a tiny part in it.
She's sort of set up to be something bigger as well, right? But then clearly couldn't be asked and was like, I wanted to do something.
Well, I mean, the writing of the female characters, this is pretty well, it is terrible. I mean, Keira Knightley is just either kidnapped or rescued or slapped the whole way through.
I was going to ask you about actually how I thought how you felt she compared to like modern day female characters, because there's times when they're like tease at the idea that they're going to make her like a bit more autonomy and a bit more like of a cool character, and there's a bit where she's like goes to grab a sword off the wall and then it turns out it's like useless and stuff, and they give you an impression they're going to let her fight and then they just snatch it away. Like, I think she made me titter when she makes some joke about a corset, but then really the rest she's just getting like you say, kidnapped and threatened with rape. That's basically her whole character by then.
Yeah, that's her whole arc. And I mean, it is because I thought that it was. I think that again, because I watched them all back to back, the last viewing that I did of them, I think that the writing of the female characters gets better, and I think that I kind of retroactively fitted that to the series and thought, there are some good female characters in it. And I can't remember the what's her name? Is it Katie something? She played Effie in Skins. She's in the final Pirates, and her character's great in it. But yeah, coming back to this, I'm like, oh my goodness, Keira Knightley is this film isn't passing the Bechdel test anytime soon. I don't think that there's 2 women who talk to each other in the whole thing.
I think I actually looked it up. If you are interested to know, they just about scrape it because they have that conversation about how they're going to escape by going around something about some rocks or something.
Oh yeah, when her housemaid or something talks to her.
No, the bit where she's talking to who I now assume is Zoe Saldana, the female pirate. They have like a 30-second interchange. That's just about passes.
Scraping over the bar.
Yeah, exactly.
I've just got, maybe this covered in redeemable features, but just picking up on something else that Ted said earlier about, how do you pronounce the name, Gore Verbinski?
Yeah.
Being a horror director, directing The Ring anyway. I sort of found myself at one point watching the film kind of craving this to be like, an 18 in the UK. Like, imagine a pirate film that was truly terrifying and truly kind of like maybe violent, gory, bloody, because it would lend itself because they're pirates, for crying out loud. But yeah, I think there was one bit that I thought was actually really cool, which kind of reminded me of like Harry Harryhausen type skeleton animation. And kind of wishing it was that kind of stop motion style thing of all these pirates, zombie pirates on the deck of the ship in the moonlight. It was actually genuinely quite terrifying. So it's a nice moments there, but not like ever really. Never. Obviously, it's a kids' film, so never going to play out. But it's just a shame that it's not like given more scares, I guess.
Well, let's use that segue into redeemable features, because I the one thing that I really enjoyed was the sword fight where they pass under the moonlight and they turn into skeletons in quite a sort of nicely subtle way. I thought that was a neat feature. Anyone else?
I think that like there's actually like a lot to like in the film. Like it's well choreographed. There's good writing for the most part, ish. Was it Hans Zimmer did the theme music for this?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, and it's
No, it's not. It's someone else. Yeah.
Dan
like
Zimmer, his less successful brother.
It's like a prodigy.
Yeah, like the theme tune is it's nice to have a sort of heroic theme song, and there's some nice, visual jokes and things in there. I think it's just, I'm not sure if I think it's like it just doesn't retain its freshness. First time you saw it, it would be great. Second time you saw it, I think I'd be dead behind the eyes.
Wikipedia says that Hans Zimmer was involved in the composing.
Well done, Ted.
No.
Proved Joe wrong. Jesus.
Perfect. Total. No.
Someone's getting defensive.
He was involved. He was playing the kazoo, based on a kazoo melody by
Hans Zimmer went to see Pirates of the Caribbean at the cinema when it came out.
He hummed the theme tune once.
Yeah.
All right, Catherine, do you have a redeemable feature?
I thought they did well with. I think Teddy was talking about more the other day, looking like a set or something the other day. I thought it actually looked quite good for its age. Like, I enjoyed the boats, and the scenery was really lovely, and it looked quite good. And overall, I think it's quite fun. As I said earlier, if you cut out half the movie, then I think I'd enjoy it plenty for a Sunday afternoon with the kids or whatever.
Joe, anything? Oh no, you did mention yours, didn't you?
I got one that just I kept thinking throughout the film, like if you're on the set of that film, which was actually in the Caribbean or in California, you must have been having an absolute blast.
Yeah.
I reckon it was a fun film to make, and it's a shame it doesn't necessarily come across in the cast all the time. But
I think in general that the both the visual effects and the kind of tangible effects, I think they hold up.
I think you're right. Yeah,
I don't know. Some of the skeletons were a bit dodgy, but Teddy, why do the pirates have so much fucking food that they don't or can't eat?
Yeah. So it was interesting because I went down a bit of a rabbit hole about the apples.
Yeah.
And how Jeffrey Rush is always like, oh, I'm going to eat a whole bushel of apples and this, that, and the other. And, there's some corners of Reddit where it's been sexualized. But, apples are kind of the motif of life and temptation and knowledge. And so I think it's quite poetic, really, if we wanted to read into it. It could be just because Jeffrey Rush is saying it. I think that if that line was given to Orlando Bloom, I'd be like, yeah, it's got nothing to do with the plot.
I did read a part about Jeffrey Rush's casting, and I think the director said we didn't want to go with anyone too good because they'd give too much of a deep performance, and Jeffrey Rush would just do it like a pantomime villain, and it would be fine because it's all it needs.
I thought he was really good at it.
Yeah.
He's fine. I think he is fine. It's just,
The role that I found really funny was the Sparrow from Game of Thrones. I can't remember his name. Jonathan Pryce as like her dad. Yeah.
Oh, Jonathan Pryce. Yeah.
He's battling with the hand and stuff. It's very, very slapstick. I did think it had some quite funny British actors that felt really wasted. That really annoyed me.
Davenport.
Sorry.
Jack Davenport's totally wasted.
Yeah.
Are you they forgot to write them any funny lines? It's really sad.
Or just being broadly comic and doing slapstick is enough, apparently.
But Mackenzie Crook's really funny. But not in Pirates of the Caribbean, sadly.
Actually, Jack Davenport is his character is a total straight man in this, but he's kind of he is a sitcom actor. They should have given him funnier stuff to do rather than just be a priggish.
Well, he has such an air of sort of pissiness that it makes me wonder if maybe he was meant to be Jack Sparrow, and then they got Johnny Depp, and then he was all like, right, okay, but you can be the asshole captain. Oh, all right, cheers. Still get paid though, yeah, it's fine.
Do I get Jack Sparrow money? No. Okay.
No, don't be stupid.
Yeah.
All right, I think we should draw this particular section to a close and move on to the next bit. And what I've done here is I've made a quiz, because everyone loves doing quizzes on Zoom, don't they now? It's a very short one.
If only we were on Zoom.
Pedant.
I despise quizzes on all other streaming platforms.
Well, you'll like this one.
I love doing quizzes.
Because we haven't touched on the sequels much, and this one is primarily about the many sequels of Pirates of the Caribbean. The Walt Disney Company was confident enough to add The Curse of the Black Pearl subtitle to the film in case any sequels were made. The director Gore Verbinski disliked the new title because it's the Aztec gold rather than the ship that is cursed, so he requested the title to be unreadable on the poster. Now, there are 4 sequels to Pirates of the Caribbean, all with equally bland and meaningless subtitles. I'm going to go around the virtual room, say one of the subtitles, and you have to tell me the number. I won't tell you if you're right till the end. And if you get yours correct, you win a doubloon. So I'm going to pick a person at a time, give you a title, and you have to tell me which number sequel it is. So I will start with Catherine. You have Dead Man's Chest.
Ooh. 3rd.
Say that again?
3. 3rd.
Okay. Matt. Dead Men Tell No Tales.
That's the last one, isn't it? Is that the most recent one?
Number 5?
5? Yeah. Are there 5?
Okay.
5.
There are 5. Joe. On Stranger Tides.
4. 4th one.
And finally, Ted. At World's End.
I think that's the 5th one. Number 5.
Right. So the results are. I've done a real complicated way of noting these down. Catherine, I'm afraid you're wrong. Dead Man's Chest is in fact number 2. Ted, you're wrong. At World's End is number 3. However, Matt and Joe, you were bang on. On Stranger Tides is number 4, and Dead Men Tell No Tales is number 5.
I'll be getting you gold or something.
I'd also just, if you're a fan of numbers and gargantuan amounts of money spent on films, it's quite an interesting list here. So the budgets of each of the sequels and their box office are pretty startling. So Curse of the Black Pearl cost $140 million to make. It returned $653 million. So you can see why they...
That's not that much really, though, is it? It's fine.
You can see why they made another 4 and counting sequels. Number 2, Dead Man's Chest, which was made 3 years later, cost $225 million, so almost double the budget, and made $1.06 billion.
Wow.
And that's so far just the most successful one. The third one, At World's End, cost $300 million. And the return was $963 million. And that film is the 5th most expensive film ever made. The most expensive film ever made is the 4th Pirates of the Caribbean film, On Stranger Tides, which cost $379 million. And the box office for that was 1.046 billion, which is the second most profitable Pirates of the Caribbean film. And on a relatively low budget, number 5, Dead Men Tell No Tales, cost just 230 million and also only brought in 794 million. So it seems that we are never going to see the end of Pirates of the Caribbean films being made. So, with that in mind, let's go back to the start, the origin, Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl, and let's mark it out of 10. Ted, let's start with you. What do you want to give it?
Do you know what? I thought I'd grown out of it, and I was pretty adamant that I was going to hate it, but then I realised that I didn't actually hate it all that much. So I'm going to give it a 6.
6. Okay, fair. Matt, what would you like to give it?
Yeah, I'm going to go with 6 as well. It's I didn't feel hornswoggled by it, but it also failed to shiver me timbers. It's fine. It's fine.
Matt, I applaud you for doing the most amount of research of any of us by throwing up a Wikipedia page of famous pirate cliches. Catherine, what would you like to give it out of 10?
Well, I'm going to give it the real definition of fine, which is 5 out of 10.
Fair. Okay, and finally, Joe, what would you like to give it?
If it wasn't so fucking long, I would have given it quite a good score because I actually quite enjoyed parts of it. But I think 6 is probably about how I feel about it.
Okay. For me, it's difficult, isn't it? Because, I mean, we've created this sort of weird benchmark system where we've watched more Rats and Police Academy. And so, therefore, this is blatantly way, way better. But then I don't know, I didn't love it that much. I was bored to tears by it. I did enjoy parts of it. But yeah, it's a solid 5 for me as well. Now, I've got a calculator here, and what I've done is I've added them all together. And oh no, I fucked it up already. Oh no. Hang on. I'm just going to do some rudimentary maths. Hang on. 9 plus 10.
We can edit this out.
Cut this out.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
Oh, this is gold.
We should be scoring this out of 8 as well, shouldn't we? If it's a pirate movie.
Keep them coming, Matt. Listen, vamp for me. Quick. I don't know why you're not hosting this. This is fucking gold. Right, Pirates of the Caribbean has an average score of 5.6. And to put that in context of the other films we've covered, it's very much in the lead. Second place with Police Academy has 1.8. And then, of course, Mallrats has 1 billion... minus 1,990,000,000. There's 9 digits all with 9 in, so more that's very much trailing. The only bit of business left for us to cover now is, hey, what are we going to watch next week? I believe Catherine has gracefully volunteered herself to pick the next film. So, Catherine, what are we going to watch?
We are going to be watching not the worst Batman film of all time, Batman Forever.
Yeah. No, it's not, is it?
No.
It's not the worst one, is it?
We'll find out next week.
Great. Cool. It will be a nice change of pace from the misogyny, homophobia, racism, and piracy of the last few weeks. So thanks very much, Catherine. That just leaves me to say thanks so much for joining us. I've been Christopher Ratcliffe, and thank you also to my co-hosts Matt Owen, Ted Wilkes, Catherine Thompson, and Joe Farncombe for keeping things shipshape. Until next time, goodbye.